This is the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, March 27th, 2019. And we're going to try to get going quickly. I think that we have a quorum now anyway. We just need 8. And so we'll get underway here. First of all, do we have any public comment? Okay, seeing no one. Let's have an approval of summary of actions. Has everyone had a chance to read that? Is there any discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
And
Yes,
okay.
And I'll second.
Second? Who second?
Larry Rosenberg.
Okay. Did you get that, Fifi? Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Next.
We need to vote now.
Oh, yeah. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Passes. General business. If you would, please have a look at the attendance log and make sure that it's all recorded correctly for yourself. And the meeting calendar is follows that, and we're scheduled next for April 24th. Okay. And we'll get into major discussion items now. Originally, we were going to go with Lafayette at this time, but we put off doing Moragas at our last meeting, and they need to go to another meeting, and so we want to take care of this right away. So I would invite the representative from Moraga to give us some highlights, and then what's going on in Moraga.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the consideration about the moving us to the front of the agenda. My name is Derek Farmer. I'm the planning director of the town of Moraga. And again, my colleague Steve Kowalski, we have 5 items on our town council in an hour, so we appreciate your consideration of that. So basically, there's actually a lot going on in Moraga. The major project that we are implementing is about 10 years ago, the town of Moraga approved the Moraga Center Specific Plan, which is sort of the general footprint for development and densities and types of housing that would go into the one priority development area that we have in Moraga, which is the Moraga Center, which is about 187 acres in the heart of town. And for various reasons, there's been sort of stop and starting over that time since then to actually get the zoning that we need to be consistent with that plan and also the development standards done so that we can have that plan ready to go. And that's the area that we're, going to meet most of our RENA, housing allocation needs and requirements, as well as the area that we've identified for, the lion's share of Moraga's affordable housing, goals that the state is getting more involved in. So we're doing that right now, and we want to get that done hopefully by the end of this calendar year or early next year at the latest. And that's a very, very involved process. We have, Citizens Advisory Committee, which actually we're setting up tonight formally by the town council. And we're going to have a technical advisory committee, which we're obviously going to want to invite CCTA to be part of. And again, that will establish the overall zoning and development standards for the Moraga Center so that way it's a lot more ready for development when development proposals come in. So that's, again, the biggest project that we have going on. It's actually a very big project in any jurisdiction given, the size of our town, which is about 19,000. And this is going to allow for, right now, about 630 to 700 housing units with, land provisions maybe higher than that based on what we see with state laws coming in. And while that's been going on, there's several housing developments that have been approved in the last 2-3 years that are underway in terms of construction. KB is building a 36-unit townhome project in the Moraga Center right now. That's underway. That should be ready for occupancy for the first occupancies probably end of this year. And then we also have a couple other developments at Summer Hills Building. They're both, single-family type, upper, income residential developments. One is about 26 lots. That's nearly done, and one's 27 lots, and that's under construction right now in Moraga. So all told, there is probably about 70 to 80 housing units that are either, nearing occupancy or just getting underway. So again, those are mostly the single-family type and the attached, but with the Moraga Center specific plan, we anticipate that we're going to have a much more diverse mix of housing types, diverse housing types, housing targeted for seniors, as well as lower income, and also trying to take advantage of the demand for student housing. We have St. Mary's College, and there's a demand for off-campus student housing that currently is not being met. So the housing diversity in Moraga we anticipate is going to get very, very diverse, over the next few years as this plan unfolds. And then we have several other developments that are in the entitlement pipeline. They're smaller, but one's a 10-lot single-family, one's about an 8-lot single-family. And then we have an applicant who's come in with just a study session right now for about 12 to 14 lots of senior housing. So again, trying to target different demographic groups, different income levels, things like that, because Moraga's housing stock is fairly homogeneous right now, but that will hopefully be changing. Briefly on an engineering note, the sinkhole has been fully repaired, the one that you probably all heard about in the news. There's implementations of different plans on Moraga Way and Moraga Road that we're implementing in terms of bike lanes and also road diet portions of Moraga Road. So those are some of the main features and things that we're doing right now in Moraga to implement development, also to improve housing. And one thing too, really quick, it's not really transportation, but it's more climate action. My colleague Steve, who's with me tonight, he's taken the lead in terms of implementing the Climate Action Plan, which has been around for a while, for about 4 or 5 years, but it's never really been implemented. There hasn't been much activity related to it. So he's taken the lead in terms of identifying areas for EV charging, for upgrades to our buildings and things like that to make them much more energy efficient, and that's a good thing. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Farmer?
Just for my own, make sure I know, the Moraga Center it's not the Rheem, it's the other.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. And really quick, the Rheem Center in our housing element is identified as an area where we would have a future specific plan done, either as part of a general plan update or a specific plan, depending on what kind of funding that we can get for that. But you're right, it's the other shopping center.
Are there any plans for upgrading the Rheem shopping center?
Correct, there is, and that's sort of ongoing right now. My colleague Steve and I, we've met recently several times with the major property owner there to do, originally now just some upgrades to the appearance, you know what I mean, just like, repainting, right? You've been there, repainting and kind of get it out of the 1960s, 70s look. And so they've been submitting plans, including new paint, new signage, some kind of facade improvements, kind of going from that standpoint forward to make it more attractive to tenants. Meanwhile, while that's been going on, there's been limited activity, but notable activity in some of the standalone buildings. The Starbucks opened last year right around this time, and that's one of the nicest Starbucks around, and that thing is packed all day and all night. And so there's also been some interest in some of the standalone buildings as part of the Rheem Center that we're actively trying to work on. And both of us actually tonight, in about 2 hours, we're going to be taking some code amendments to the town council to try to simplify the entitlement process for new businesses that are coming into the commercial parts of Moraga. We actually have a commercial district where the only allowed use is agriculture. So given that what we're working with, it's kind of a challenge, but we're trying to address that and make the town a lot more business friendly.
Do you find that you're getting pushback from residents in Moraga if you're trying to touch that agriculture zoning or anything close to it?
Well, the interesting thing is that in setting up the Citizens Advisory Committee, which we're also taking for formal adoption tonight to the Town Council, we put out basically an application flyer, put it on all the different social media sites, our website and all that. And there was sort of a fear that everybody who's against anything happening would be wanting to be on this. And what we're finding is that there's a lot of push in the community, a lot of younger families moving in, and people who are tired of going to we're in Walnut Creek, sorry, but tired of going to Walnut Creek or Lafayette to have a decent bite to eat for dinner. And so there's a lot of push to get more retail and restaurant choices in town. And in the past year that my colleague and I have been there, we've only been there a short time, we've had more restaurants open in Moraga than in the previous decade. So we're trying to start that ball rolling in terms of attracting and keeping more residents in town to eat and shop.
And as regards to the climate action plan, I thank you for having one of those and implementing it. I know it's something that not every city's looking at. What about Moraga's fleet? Have you looked at, I think the City of LA started a program for small cities and municipalities to partake in a larger fleet purchase program. The operating cost, of course, makes sense, but I know that the upfront can be an issue for municipalities.
I just know a limited amount of that. Our police chief has been looking into that in terms of purchasing vehicles through programs. I'm not sure it's that exact one, but I know that roughly 6 months ago, he flew down to Southern California to buy a police car. So that might have been it. And so we are looking into that, and it's more of a budget standpoint too, because we have limited funds. We're trying to find whatever resources we can with the funds that we have. But that's an excellent program.
The Livable Moraga Road project, is that something that's been adopted since this reporting period?
Well, it's interesting. The Livable Moraga Road project, it's been done. It's been taken to council. It's never been formally adopted. And ironically, portions of it on Moraga Road are being implemented physically as we speak. The plan itself still needs to be formally adopted. So it's kind of like it's one of these pieces that we're picking up that we're trying to figure out how to formally adopt. We've gotten CCTA funding for that, and we're very aware of that. So that is one of the things that's on our plate to formally adopt, since we're already using it. So yeah.
The specific plan for the town center, do you have that? Is that on the website?
It is on the website. So if you go on our town website and go under planning, we have a dedicated web page for it, and we're going to be updating that a lot this year as we go through this development process for the zoning and the development standards.
Okay, if no one has any further questions for Mr. Farmer, Larry, would you like to make a recommendation?
Well, thank you, Larry. I'd like to make a motion to accept the report as submitted by the town of Moraga and presented by Derek Farmer. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll second that.
Chadwick seconds. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Any abstentions? None. It's unanimous. Congratulations on that.
Thank you for having us here. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
This will go before the planning committee on the, that doesn't sound right. Well, we're past that already, so we'll have to figure that out later. All right, thank you. All right, now we'll get back into our regular schedule. And now we'll entertain the City of Lafayette.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. My name is Mike Moran. I'm the Director of Engineering and Public Works with the City of Lafayette. And this is Greg Wolf. He is the Interim Planning Director with City of Lafayette. Thought I'd just talk about some of the infrastructure and roads and drains and traffic congestion and so forth. Over this reporting period, it occurred to me we did complete our downtown congestion plan. That was quite a study with numerous meetings, neighborhood meetings, community meetings, and then all the commissions, transportation, circulation, planning, of course, city council ultimately. So we did get a completed plan, and that plan was to obviously help downtown congestion or reduce the congestion we have there. And it had all sorts of things like the pilot study that we currently have in place, which is just adding a second right-hand turn off Moraga Road onto Mount Diablo Boulevard, to a freeway overpass from Moraga Road directly onto Highway 24, not as likely to occur anytime soon. But, you know, it just looked at the gamut, a pedestrian bridge for the elementary school and junior high school that were near there over Moraga Road and things like that. So that was a big completion. We're going after the lowest hanging fruit and the least expensive at first. But as I said, we have a pilot study in action, and we will be looking at more. There's a new objective committee in addition to our Transportation and Circulation Commission that's just been activated on like this 2-month, 3-month push to kind of give some more focus on how we want to implement that plan. And then I would just add, we're very good at spending our Measure J, gas tax, SB1, road impact monies. We have a pavement reconstruction project that we've had every year for many years, in addition to a road maintenance project. It occurs to me, I've been with Lafayette for over 20 years, and our PCI is currently about 76, and that's about 20 points higher than it was 20 years ago, so we've gone up about a point a year. The push from this point on will be to maintain that. We actually had a high of 79 or maybe even 80 for about a week. Which is a golden number, so we didn't hang on to it. And in part because we focused on residential streets and we kind of let our arterials drop a little bit, but we're starting this next year, we'll be refocusing on arterials again, like Pleasant Hill Road, Moraga Road, St. Mary's Road, and of course Mount Diablo Boulevard. So, but we have an active pavement maintenance program, and I am actually next month going to be requesting additional funding from what we thought we'd be supporting over the next couple years, because our construction costs have increased quite a bit, and we want to maintain that PCI. They initially passed, the residents of Lafayette initially passed a road and drain bond back, I believe, in '95, and that's kind of what kicked this off and allowed us to get to having good streets, because they were really in poor condition years ago. So we don't have any problem spending the monies that we're getting for road maintenance, reconstruction. We also did do a signal synchronization project. I have kind of a public works project rather than a capital project, where I'm phasing out new controllers for our traffic signal cabinets, because we have pretty dated technology, to try and run different programs, try and have better control, more smart features. And although I don't have like a grant that would allow me to do all of Mount Diablo Boulevard, even without that, I want to phase in a couple at a time. And in fact, part of that right-hand turn pilot is where I implemented one of those, and just the adjacent First Street at Mount Diablo Boulevard, which is our busiest signal in town because it leads right to Highway 24, is another intersection where I just added some better technology so we can get traffic data, counts, we can track what's going on there, we have better control over the intersection, and can have a more elaborate program as well. So that's 2 intersections I've phased, and we'll be phasing more over time. And that's mostly for the roads and streets and maintenance, and Greg, I'm sure, has some things to say about development.
Good evening. I think it's safe to say that we are seeing unprecedented levels of development interest in Lafayette and activity. Recently completed projects include a 72-unit senior housing facility at the corner of 2nd Street and Mount Diablo, Merrill Gardens, and it is a handsome building and very well received by the community. Fully underground parking, very nice plaza. The Woodbury at the west end of town near our Veterans Building was completed several years ago, putting 56 condominiums for families downsizing. Empty nesters was the target, and that's proven out to be the case. Eden Housing did a affordable housing project for seniors in Lafayette. Belle Terre is the project. It's in the east end of town. One of the properties was the former Butler Conti Dodge, and so that, pardon me, that went to Merrill Garden. I'm sorry, Eden Housing, and the city used redevelopment funds at that time to help subsidize the construction, the purchase and construction of that. 46 units for seniors, which are all income restricted to very low income seniors. Currently under construction in town are the Woodbury Highlands project. So if you know where the Woodbury is, near the Veterans Building, up on top of that hill, there's been significant heavy equipment, flattening areas, grading it out to accommodate a 99-unit condominium project. 15% of those units will be below market rate, income restricted to low and moderate income households. There's also a very big hole in the ground at the corner of Mount Diablo Boulevard and Dolores Drive. Many people think it's a C3 basin, but it is not for stormwater purposes. Actually, some ducks have taken up residency over the winter months. But as soon as dry weather hits us, they will be starting the foundations and vertical construction. It's a 66-unit condominium project. There'll be some commercial space and a restaurant at the corner, and parking is fully underground at that. So stepping back, 15% of those units will also be income restricted to below market rate. If you visited Trader Joe's, adjacent to Trader Joe's, just a little bit further down the street, right next door, is a small condominium project, 6 units by Lennox. The project, they called it 6, and that's currently under construction. They're starting vertical construction, I think, as we speak. There are a series of small single-family residences on infill lots throughout town. So globally, our 2002 general plan update, which was comprehensive, I'd worked on that, envisioned that the bulk of growth in dwelling units would occur in our downtown, close to transit and services, and that has borne out. We have a downtown-specific plan adopted about 5 years ago, followed on by downtown design guidelines. We are currently in progress for preparing objective standards to comply with recent changes in state law. And so the numbers of units are being concentrated in the downtown, close to BART and other services. Another project that's been entitled but they haven't broken ground on it yet, is a 12-unit condominium project on Lafayette Circle. So on the east side are several restaurants, Chow and the Cooperage, and this is on the west side as it gets into the residential neighborhood. And then just this past Monday night, the City Council approved a 13-unit condominium project at the northeast corner of Mount Diablo Boulevard and Brown Avenue. So if you know where the Forge is and Bonehead Barbecue, there's a auto repair facility on the east side of Brown Avenue, and that will be redeveloped into 13 condominium units. And that was the first project that normally it would just be approved at the Planning Commission, but they were requesting concessions and waivers under the city's density bonus ordinance. And so it went to the City Council and was approved at that on Monday night. Pre-application meetings, we have significant interest for developers to come to town. One that had a public meeting with the neighborhood this past week. if you know where our library is, immediately opposite that on the south side of Golden Gate Way is the property we call it the Lincoln Building, because Lincoln owned it for a long time, but it's an open surface parking lot and an aged apartment building that many of those units have been converted away from residential and are salons of various sort. So the property owner is under full steam ahead to redevelop that site with housing, 3 stories of housing, roughly 50 units. And that would be rental housing as well. So Lenore, the 66 units with the big hole in the ground, I think was perhaps the one exception from the rest. I think all the ones I cited of more than 7 units, because of our requirements under the redevelopment agency and our inclusionary housing ordinance, provide 15% below market rate units. So there was from 1994 to 2012, the city had a redevelopment agency and had some monies to assist, but it also committed that 15% of the units would be income restricted to below market rate. With the dissolution of redevelopment by the state in 2012, we no longer had that requirement, and so shortly thereafter adopted a local inclusionary housing ordinance. So that requirement is back in place, and case law up until that point had been undecided with respect to whether the city could impose that on rental housing. So at that point in time, it was simply attributable to for sale housing. Development case law being resolved and clarified by the state, this past year revised the inclusionary housing ordinance to be 15% below market rate for both for sale projects and now rental projects as well. So we see that as a favorable move. We had been seeing less than 10 accessory dwelling units per year, but 5 to 8 to 10 perking along after 2000. That has increased, and maybe doubled, gone up 50%. So we're seeing about a dozen to 15 in the last couple of years. A contributing factor could be that this past year we increased the maximum permissible size from 750 square feet for an ADU to 1,200 square feet for an ADU. So with that, with the inclusionary housing updated and the change for accessory dwelling units, I'm happy to take any questions.
I have one question, if I may. Thank you for the presentation. On Mount Diablo Boulevard, long stretched boulevard, and you're having the housing either adjacent or shortly beyond Mount Diablo Boulevard. And a lot of seniors, I presume, are going to be moving into these places. Have you had any talks with, and discussions rather, with County Connection to find out whether they can't run some kind of I don't like to use the word shuttle, but they've done it in other cities where it just runs down one long street so the seniors don't have to call Uber or Lyft, if they know how to, or whatever, to get from one end of the city, like you mentioned, to Trader Joe's or even beyond that to the Veterans Building. What are your thoughts on that?
So the City of Lafayette for many years now has had what's termed the Spirit Van, the Lumberin. It's for seniors, and it serves Lafayette and Moraga, I believe. I don't know about Orinda, but basically the city staffs and supports the operations of it, but the drivers are all volunteers. And so they are dedicated to picking up, dropping off, and transporting seniors.
But you know what I'm talking about?
I
So
do.
a senior doesn't have to call somebody. They can just get on a bus and go from one end of the city. I don't know how many miles. Maybe that's a couple of miles. They can't walk. and they can't, just go shopping and then get on a bus and go back home, maybe, well, you explained it. You don't have it.
We don't, and it's certainly something we could talk to CCTA about.
Yeah.
And I can engage with our Senior Services Commission, and we currently have a effort going forward to be more inclusive in all aspects, eight realms of livability for seniors in the community, and so this would fall right into that.
And also people being able to get from these far locations to the BART station.
Mm-hmm.
That many people don't drive, and they have to, especially I'm thinking of seniors or maybe even low-income folks that just don't have that opportunity. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned it in your presentation, that right turn from Moraga Road onto Mount Diablo Boulevard. Are you ever going to really, it's been raining, I realize that. Are you ever going to really paint it and make signs that show you can do those things?
Well,
because I go there every day.
there is paint and signs right now, and in fact, we added one like right after we started it. I don't know if it's going to go permanent or not. It is a
I
pilot
see.
study. It may be removed. So it was not done, for example, in thermoplastic. It is painted,
Yeah.
and we even kind of went into the crosswalk and through the crosswalk, which you normally wouldn't stripe because it was new and you really wanted to delineate it. But people aren't quite used to it yet, and it only helps you if you have a green light because that center lane can now turn left, go straight, or turn right. And if you're trying to turn right and you're sitting behind somebody that's at a red light that's going to go straight or left,
Right.
you're
I
stuck,
understand,
right?
sure.
Yeah. So it adds some. Honestly, I think it's taken some months, and it has been a very rainy season since we started it. We really started it in the winter, and we had anticipated completing that study this month, about now, and it's going to extend a little while because of the conditions we've had. The visibility isn't quite there, and people are just now learning how to work it.
I would say 99% of the people who use that turn are in the far right-hand lane.
Right.
Rarely do I see somebody, Anyway, I just wanted,
Yes.
you guys are doing.
So it's still a pilot study.
Yeah.
If it goes permanent, it will have more permanent-looking striping. The signage is what you would have if it was permanent.
Yeah, I frankly, to be honest with you, I didn't even notice it
Okay.
because I've been doing that turn so many times.
Sure.
But I just want to compliment both of you on what's going on, with you and your staff and the council in Lafayette, doing a superb job. I mean,
Thank you.
things are really moving along, so congratulations.
Question, could you give us an update on the property that's, I believe it's Pleasant Hill Road and Deer Hill?
I'd be happy to. So the Terraces of Lafayette application was submitted in March of 2011. Once deemed complete, went into environmental review. In 2013, the city certified the final EIR on the project. As it moved into public hearings in the fall, the city council asked staff to engage with the developer to see if there was a project that the developer would build and the community might find more palatable. The project as submitted is 14 apartment buildings, 2 and 3 stories on the open land at the northwest corner of essentially the freeway and Pleasant Hill Road. And there was significant, 315 units, affordable to moderate income households. And so we engaged with the developer and ultimately a 44-unit single-family residence project along with construction of a community park, which included a dog park and tot lot. But most importantly, we have a severe shortage of athletic field space for the variety of youth sports that are participated in the community. So that has been a need, and finding flat lands to build a athletic field has been very challenging. And so the city council ultimately, that project was named the Homes at Deer Hill. It went through a review process and ultimately approved by the City Council in 2015. That was referended because it involved a general plan amendment to downzone the property from 35 dwelling units per acre to 2 dwelling units per acre. So that general plan amendment and the commensurate rezoning was referended, and a court ultimately decided that we did not initially put it on the ballot for, and I won't go into the necessary details, but our city attorney concluded that it would have violated state law to put it on the ballot. That the trial court held in our favor, and it was appealed. During that time frame, the Morgan Hill case came out and reversed roughly 35 years of standing case law. So the conclusion is that we put it on the ballot in 2018. The majority of the voters voted to turn down the project. And so that approval is undone. The developer, O'Brien Land Company, then said, pursuant to our process agreement, that put the terraces on hold while the homes at Deer Hill was proposed and considered, reactivated their application for 315 moderate income apartments. Given the time frame that has passed between the certification of the EIR and where we are today, additional environmental review is underway. And so that will be moving forward when complete. You're welcome.
That's a pretty remarkable. I've been following this story on Nextdoor since I'm in Pleasant Hill. I see all the Lafayette posts about Deer Hill, and I've been seeing this going year after year after year. And do you think that the same level of pushback that there was 6 years ago now that killed the first project is going to be there today? Or are people a bit more cognizant of the need for housing?
I think it remains to be seen.
Patricia?
Hi. I'm looking on your table A3, your annual building activity report summary for above moderate income units. And I see you have no mobile homes anything being built in that area, or do you have mobile home parks? I've been to Lafayette many, many times, but of course I'm not looking for them. So can you explain how there's 0 and 0?
Oh, thank you. To my knowledge, no mobile homes have been proposed in the reportable period. Our code allows for mobile homes and modular homes, and I can point to a few examples of modular homes where it is built in a factory and taken to the site and craned into place. Very nice homes, but property owners have not proposed mobile homes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I read your report actually last night, very interested. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction than other people. I'm really interested in a couple of, one of the major drivers of traffic in the morning and the afternoon is school. And I've read more in your report about school-based kind of incentives and stuff like that. So I have a couple just really quick questions. What is your involvement or participation in the La Miranda school bus program? How is that incentivized in a community where, I don't know, I'm just saying in an affluent community, usually public transportation is sort of
So
poo-pooed.
it's a popular program, but we've kind of just de-incentivized it by doubling the cost because just they were under a contract for the school bus system, the drivers and so forth, and cost increased dramatically. It had been held very low for quite a while, and it was quite a bargain. I think it's going from like $5 a day to $9 a day. We don't know how that's going to fall out, and that is for La Miranda, not just Lafayette, but down the hall from us is the school bus coordinator, Juliet, and so I'm familiar.
Yeah, I
with
grew up
the
in New
program.
Mexico, and we were bused to school for free. That was part of our taxes. So I was just kind of interested nobody drove around at that time of day. The other thing was I saw that you incentivized the students themselves through carpool programs and stuff like that. What did the incentive look like to the student?
I don't know exactly. That's through our SWAT, and we have a gal that works on that and gets them to carpool. It gives them a prime parking spot. That's part of it. But it also gives them like a Starbucks card or something else. But I don't know the order of magnitude of, of the benefit there. Mostly it's, hey, you get to park here. Yeah.
No, and that's a good incentive. All right. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
All right. Are there any further questions for the gentleman from Lafayette?
My apologies, I got distracted from Deer Hill. Commendations on the number of housing units that you are building and that are planned. Is especially interesting, too, that you're up to, like you say, 12 or 15 ADUs. That's pretty good compared to some of the other cities that we've seen come through here. What do your fees happen to be? Do you have an impact fee or just normal permit fees for the city itself?
There would be certainly the normal just building permit fee. The only impact fees that we charge, and certainly no like connection fees to utilities for be it water, gas, electric. The fees that would apply are parkland, essentially. So as we believe it or not, the city has a dearth of parkland in terms of the Quimby Act, and so we're not yet at 5 acres per 1,000 residents. And so there is a fee associated with new development, new dwelling units, to the thesis being that as more residents are living in the community, there's going to be increased demand for parkland and park facilities. So there is that fee. Certainly, to maintain and increase the capacity in our storm drain system, any new impervious surface is charged a very small fee. And then the La Miranda Fee and Finance Authority has a sub-regional traffic mitigation fee, which is prorated. And it's not a full single-family dwelling unit fee. It's prorated for an accessory dwelling unit. So those are the fees that would apply.
Do you happen to know, are those percent-based flat fees or?
The drainage impact fee is based on per square foot of new net impervious increase. And the other two, parkland and traffic, are per unit. So flat fees per unit, irrespective of size. That may change in the.
You don't know what they are, though.
Off the top of my head, parkland is, I think, 5,000 to 6,000, and I think the traffic mitigation is a similar amount.
So that's
yeah.
That's just for, so that's, it sounds like probably similar to all La Miranda, well, Lafayette specifically for the park fee, but you're talking about, what, 8% of the project cost is between two of those fees. Seems like a significant barrier.
I don't know what the construction costs are for a 1,200 square foot ADU, but they're not all necessarily that size. So I don't have the capacity to say right now, as a function of the overall construction costs, what the impact fees would. But I think we'll be looking at that.
Thank you.
Okay, any final questions? All right. Unfortunately, our Lafayette representative couldn't be here this evening, and I'll be happy to recommend acceptance of your report. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Chadwick. All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. Passes unanimously. Congratulations, and thank you very much for your report this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is the report from the City of Danville. Welcome, gentlemen. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So from the town of Danville, I'd like to introduce Kevin Gailey. He is our Chief of Planning. He's going to talk about housing this evening. And I'm Andy Dillard. I'm the Transportation Manager, and I will be talking about all things transportation and CIP projects and what Danville is up to. So thanks for having us. Appreciate it. So I'd like to begin by kind of going back a little bit as far as during the reporting period, some of the multi-jurisdictional cooperative planning efforts that have been ongoing and that took place over the period. Of significance, as you probably all know, all the action plans were adopted in 2017, I believe, including in the southern Contra Costa region is the Tri-Valley Transportation Plan, Action Plan for Routes of Regional Significance. It's a mouthful. We were happy about that. And one thing that we're excited about with that plan going forward that I will highlight is that one of the things that we look at is we establish metrics called multimodal transportation service objectives. And one of the things that that's included in the Tri-Valley Action Plan is going forward is to start including the Iron Horse Trail, looking at those transportation service objectives. Right now we look at the roadway networks, the arterials, the freeways, but we're going to start including the Iron Horse Trail. And so we've started talking about metrics about how to do that, how to evaluate the trail from the pavement condition to collisions at the crossings, all those types of things. So in the next action plan version, that's something that we're going to be working on. So we're excited about that. And then along with that is all the usual things, the level of services for the intersections and the arterials that we included in that as well. So, as I touched upon, Danville continues to actively be engaged with the Southwest Area Transportation Committee, the Tri-Valley Transportation Council, the Dory Valley Oversight Committee to talk about all things transportation. With the Dory Valley Oversight Committee and the Tri-Valley Transportation Council, both of those programs, they collect a transportation mitigation fee, similar to what you heard from the folks from Lafayette. So we continue to work on that. We're actually about ready to undertake a pretty large effort with the Tri-Valley transportation fee to do a full-blown nexus study. It's time for us to update that and come up with a new list of projects for the Tri-Valley region. So that's something that we're going to be working on. It's probably going to be a good 2-year process for that. So that's starting to ramp up. And then, of course, as you're probably well aware, similar to La Marinda, we have our traffics program that we're very proud of. That's our student transportation, our congestion relief program. It's funded with Measure J, and it's been very successful. And like the La Marinda program, that program is facing some challenges with increased costs. We just actually entered into a new 5-year contract with our service provider, and we are seeing similar increases that the La Marinda program is seeing. The one advantage we have in the South County is we have more ridership, and we're able to tier our routes so we can leverage the bus net system that we have. We have a 23-bus fleet, and we tier most of those to elementary and middle schools. So we're able to double up the usage in a sense for those buses. So that program, even though prices are increasing, we think we have a handle on where we're going to go forward as far as the pass rates increases that we're looking at. We actually just adopted the pass rate for next year. So we'll be keeping a close eye on Measure J forecasts over the next 5 years and gauging off that as far as where we're going to put those pass rates. Switching gears, talk about Danville proper for a few moments. With a reporting period, we're very centric in parking, ped improvements, and pavement. That's where our focus has been in our capital improvement program. Very parking intensive. During the reporting period, we completed our Rose Street parking lot. It added 79 parking spaces within the north end of our downtown. It was very much needed. We recently just completed expansion of our Village Theater parking lot. That went from, I believe, 70 spaces to 200 spaces. And then finally, it's coming down the pike here, our Sycamore Danville Park and Ride is under design right now for expansion as well. That's currently 240 spaces, and that's going to be going up to between 350 to 360 parking spaces. And as you may know, that Park and Ride is one of the largest in the county, and it's very much utilized. It's become popular with the Genentech and the tech buses, so that continues to be a challenge as well. But that's a project that we're very much looking forward to, and there's other elements to that too. We're adding a significant amount of bike parking. The e-lockers that you see at all the BART stations, we're going to install 32 of those lockers because we're seeing a lot more folks utilizing the infrastructure that we have now kind of as a first last mile connection to get to the park and ride so they don't have to actually drive there. So that's something that will be happening with the project as well. And just really briefly to touch on during the reporting period, some of the big projects that were completed. As I mentioned, we invested a significant amount in pavement. Over the 2 years, rough estimate was about $8 million in residential paving projects over the 2-year period, various slurry seal and pavement rehabilitation projects. The big marquee project was final completion of a 3-phase paving project. It was safety loop funded. It was the Camino Tasajera Crow Canyon corridor. We paved over 5 miles of roadway throughout that corridor. Replaced over 800 traffic loops. We added the green paint that I think everybody has been accustomed to seeing, and it was very well received by the public, and it's something that we're going to be continuing to do is utilize the green the bicycle infrastructure, if you will, going forward. So for pavement, again, lots of investments there. I was inspired by the conversation I heard, I believe was City of Lafayette, regarding electric vehicles. Our town has been investing in its own fleet. Our building and planning divisions, and actually our whole development services division, is using mostly electric vehicles now for their building inspections and field inspections. I believe we have 9 or 10 ports at our town offices, and we're looking to install more soon. And as well, we also installed electric vehicle chargers throughout our downtown and some of our parking lots. So that's something that we're definitely investing in. So that's kind of the highlights. One other thing I will highlight on, because we are at CCTA, and the conversation is always about technology and where things are going with CVAV and ITS, and the town is getting ready to upgrade its traffic signal system. It's going to take several years, but we have, similar to my colleagues before us who are speaking to their aging traffic signals, we are in the same boat, and we're looking to upgrade our signal system with the latest and greatest in technology, whatever we can afford, and we're going to phase that over several years. We're still doing some research, but we're getting close to making that decision, and we're very excited about that. So that is coming soon. And I will hand it over to Kevin, who will talk about housing in Danville.
So what were the 3 Ps? Pavement, parking, and?
Ped and bike.
Ped and bike. Kevin Gailey, Chief of Planning. I've been at the town for 31 years. I had the pleasure to go through 4 cycles of housing elements, and right or wrong, we did them in-house rather than sending them out. So I'm going to probably tend to speak more on trends rather than specific projects, but we can talk about specific projects as well. So the years we're looking at, 16 and 17, are sandwiched between the first half of the current housing element period, which runs from 15 through 22. So you can take a snapshot of those 2 years, but it's hard to resist looking at, well, we're halfway through the 8-year cycle for the current planning cycle. The town happily got our element certified, happily that we qualified for an 8-year review period or approval period. That entailed updating a bunch of our ordinances, supportive housing, transition housing, reasonable accommodation. It meant having adequate sites by general plan and zoning by right for our assigned low income and very low income components of our regional housing needs. And the major things that we need to look forward to in our implementation halfway through this 8-year cycle is to check in on all the housing related ordinances. I'm sure most of you are aware that the state has been very active on passing batches of housing legislation, and we will need to go back and check, even though our ordinances relating to housing are between 3 and 5 years new, we will have to check back to see how state legislation has affected that. So speaking in terms of trends, we're largely built out, and finding sites for our very low and our low income means finding sites that by right, respectively, are 25 units an acre minimum for the very low allocation and 20 units an acre for our low. A lot of our low is handled by our ADU activity. So we're halfway through the cycle. We're a little bit more than 15 a year second units. And the state legislation has really impacted that in that we're seeing more that are right up to the top end of what we allow by building permit. So allowed by right is 1,000 square feet. If property has 40,000 square feet or more, we will, through a quasi discretionary review, limited review, we'll look up to 2,000 square feet. We accommodate very liberal setbacks. We allow 2-story second units. We allow inclusion of garages as long as they're not larger than what would be normal for a 2-car garage. So we have seen a spike in our second unit activity and a spike on the spectrum, the larger sizes of those. And I would say that's directly tied to state directive not to have the utility companies pass on inappropriate fees. Central Stands still hits these very significantly, but it's now in the tune of 5,000 to 6,000 a unit rather than 10 or 12,000 a unit. We waive virtually all our fees, so we do charge some pass-through fees, but we don't assess a residential transportation impact program fee. Even for single-family homes, that's $2,000 a unit. We don't charge anything for second units. So let's see. The big thing that probably has happened over the last part of the past cycle and currently in 4 years into the current cycle is that we had a regional housing needs allocation shortfall. So with our update to our general plan in 2013, we have to find 8 acres of 25 units an acre minimum and 2 acres of 20 units an acre minimum. And we found those in 2 sites. So one of those 2 sites is now about a 2-acre hole in the ground for a couple hundred parking spaces. So it was approved for 150 units, an invoked density bonus. So I got a 35% bonus on top of the 30 units an acre. So it's being built out about 40 units an acre. The target units in that project are very low, so we'll get 10 very low income units assured through affordable housing agreement for 55 years. The other sites, both for the 20 unit acre, 2 acres of that, and the remaining 5 acres of 25 units an acre minimum are on what we call the Burrell site, which East Bay Regional Park District now has. It's the Walnut Orchard down there between Costco and the freeway, very close to our southern boundary, so shares a boundary with City of San Ramon. That site, very timely to be here, is I've heard from our city attorney that as of last week, the Park District had successfully navigated through the court system and now has a go-ahead to go ahead and sell that 7 acres to multifamily builders to basically offset the cost of taking on the 17 acres that were given to them by Mr. Burrell when he passed. So we're probably anticipating within the 4-year period remaining for the current housing planning cycle that we'll see entitlements granted on those. So, the challenge will be, will I retire before I have to write a 5th housing element? And I might be motivated by the thought that there's not going to be any carryover multifamily land. We were fortunate that the way it worked, the 10 acres we're talking about counted for both the prior cycle and have counted for the current cycle. The CASA compact, you may have heard some discussion of, that's going to change things. If I was to guess where we're going to end up, I would think next housing cycle, your requirement for by right multifamily targeted at prescribed minimum densities for your very low income assignment and your low income assignment are going to be twice the acreage necessary to hit your assignment. So as hard as it was to find 10 acres, if we have the same allocation as for the next cycle as we have for the current cycle, we will be looking for 20 acres, not 10 acres. And that may be for all jurisdictions up and down the state. Because we're closing in on build-out while we do have multifamily happening, if I look at the 2-year period we're talking about, we only issued permits for 80 units, and only 40 of those were net new units. But for the 4-year period, talking about finals and permits underway, we've issued permits for 450 units. I think our allocation was about 550, but only 345 of those are net new. So a big trend is we're seeing what we call replacement single-family dwelling units. So especially on our west side, but not necessarily limited to the west side, we're seeing homes that were built in the 1950s basically being sold for the dirt, and they're being torn down and rebuilt. And so far, we've allowed that to be just a building permit. Our council has not wanted to venture into design review, even for what some people would call McMansion, or McMansions. So pretty comfortable with what's been built on the west side. We probably have about 50 homes that are either tear down, rebuild, or basically tear off the roof and triple the size of the footprint. So they're effectively new homes. So out of the 450 permits we've issued 4 years into the current 8-year cycle, just slightly over 100 of those are replacement single family. So they don't count as net new housing, but they're very much a part of what's going on. So they're really becoming an important trend for where we're going on new housing. Speak a little bit more about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Prior cycle, with very close review from HCD, we got concurrence that any second unit we saw built that was 750 square feet or smaller would be deemed appropriate by design, its market rate value, its rental value, the probable occupants for low income. So important for us that every 20 of those that we see built and we're very accommodating for second units. Every 20 of those we see built is 1 acre of multifamily we don't need to go out and find in the next cycle. So when we see 15 of those a year, that's good news, except that the change at the state on limiting costs that are a burden on second units means that about half of the second units we see are bigger than that. And because of rising rental rates, this cycle, we weren't able to say 750 square feet or smaller, low income. Now with input from the state, the second unit has to be 550 square feet or smaller. Otherwise, the thought is that it's not, the market value would make it not affordable for low-income households. Now, some of the second units we do are deed restricted because they're provided as a means for a project to meet its inclusionary housing requirement. So we've had inclusionary housing requirements for over 25 years. We've had 42 of 43 projects subject to inclusionary build their affordable housing that's required by the ordinance in their project. The one and only one we didn't do is the project behind the library, and they paid an in lieu fee, but they arguably were not subject to our inclusionary, but were subject to inclusionary state redevelopment law inclusionary. And the fees they paid us basically were the base payment just to do the bridge housing project, the senior housing project that we built on Laurel. So very happy because we've taken the position that developers know how to build housing better than we do. We don't want their money because we'd have to charge them an arm and a leg because we can't do it as efficiently as they can. And it's been built in since that's a requirement for 25 years. Developers know what they need to do, and it's priced into the purchase price of properties. Now, definitely a trend that we're seeing where density bonus for the first 25 years that Danville was a city, we didn't see any projects that invoked density bonus. And that's because even though our ordinance was a little more liberal than the state's, there wasn't enough upside for developers to do density bonus. Well, that's changed over the last 3 years. The state has really pretty much doubled the bonus that you can get given how much affordable units you provide. So pretty much we're seeing most projects that we process now invoking density bonus. Now, the tricky part of this is that some of them aren't really asking for a bonus. They're just invoking density bonus to get protection from being sued and limiting our review process. So it's maybe abusing the process, and I don't think it's going to be unique for Danville, but we have our council members say, I don't like this, but we have to approve it. We have no choice under density bonus. Well, that's one way to get an approval, but it is a trend, maybe a worrisome trend. So with that, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Talking about your Sycamore Park and Ride, the only time I was ever in there, there was no access to the Iron Horse Trail towards the north. Why is that, and can that be improved?
Great question. Thanks for asking that. So when the park and ride was initially built, really the only access is you have to exit the lot and go out to the corner. But with the new plan, the new project, we're actually going to have 2 new connections proposed, one at the north end of the lot, as you mentioned, and then one about a third of the way into the lot, right across from where the new bank of bike lockers will be. So there will be 2 new connections as part of that project. Okay.
Well, I'm sure you can imagine where my questions are going. I appreciate all the info on ADUs, and actually I find the rate that you're building as well as the fee schedule that you guys have to be, well, commendable. I was curious, too, if you're actually seeing the ADUs as a way of kind of future-proofing from what will be a pretty big hit to the city if you have to go and locate 20 acres or even another 10 at this point. I know would be very difficult for you all. maybe a curiosity, since you've got so many of these rebuilds. My wife's from Danville, so I've seen exactly what you're talking about. Every year, another old house that's been there 60, 80 years, torn down, razed. A McMansion is up in 8 months. I don't know if you can propose this or work with people who are doing that sort of project, but maybe provide an incentive for a lock-in suite. I was at our city's planning commission last night, and what they're proposing is, instead of the detached units or instead of kind of the traditional ADU layout, the lock-in suites, both sides log, completely self-sustaining unit if you want it, or it can be a family unit or what have you. But that might be a quick way, especially since you can tailor the square footage requirements on that year by year, to help you hit those numbers. Just something I thought of as you were kind of giving that presentation.
A good number of the replacement single-family homes, and they have averaged in size, depending on the year, between 3,500 and 4,500 square feet. And these largely are on 15,000 square foot flat rectangular lots on the west side of town. A good number of them are coming in with second units.
Really?
Either just it makes sense for flexibility on helping pay for the cost of building that big of a new home, and the dirt's $1.6 million just to buy a lot, and then you're burdened with tearing down a house, and then you get to design the house and build the house. So the numbers are helped if there's the potential for some extra income and the flexibility it provides. I did mention that we have an inclusionary ordinance that you can skin. You can solve your inclusionary variety of ways, but one of the ways, because it used to target moderate income, and we were meeting our moderate, but we weren't hitting anywhere near our low income, we changed the inclusionary, and it really works for densities of 1 to 3 units an acre or 3 to 5, to tell a developer, do turnkey second units in 1/4 of your units. We won't require you to rent them. I mean, it's hard to require somebody to rent them, but we'll require you to build them in a way that the kitchen and the bathroom back up to kitchen in the main unit, so they can't be absorbed into the home. They're pretty much there permanently, and those almost always are in that 550 square foot or smaller. So we have a project, you may know the Tassera Nursery site, about halfway out Sycamore Valley. They've invoked density bonus because they know that's going to help them almost assuredly get an approval. They bump from 15 units to 18 units. The math is when you invoke density bonus, you round up, so everything rounds up. So their baseline units is 16 instead of 15. Instead of doing 1 moderate income unit or 4 second units, they're invoking density bonus, and they're going to have 8 second units, all 550 square feet or lower. Now, they can do second units by right. Anybody that has a single-family home can do a second unit. You don't have to do parking. It's a building permit if it's under 1,000 square feet, but they feel it hits the market to do one of their 2 plan types with second units. And so we'll be able to count out of that one project 8 units appropriate for low income.
So you're actually seeing developers, I mean, they know the market better than we do, that the second units are now starting to be something desirable.
Well, they definitely feel they can sell that square footage for the same amount they sell the single family, if not slightly more, because it is a value-added flexibility to the buyer.
I had a question about the green-colored bicycle infrastructure you were mentioning. Are you converting existing bicycle lanes to the green version, or are you adding new infrastructure?
So what we've done so far with this green thermoplastic is we're just basically retrofitting existing bike lanes, particularly on Camino Tassajara, where I was talking about earlier. But we did do a modification on Danville Boulevard. Actually, that was our first go at the green bike lanes, and we did a buffered bike lane along Danville Boulevard in front of San Ramon Valley High School, where you have parking on both sides, lots of traffic, a lot of pedestrians crossing the street. So we incorporated that, but basically, yeah, they were just a modification of existing Class 2 bike lanes.
And for the buffered bike lane, how did you find the space to fit in that buffer? It's only, what, a foot or two to make it buffered, I guess, but it's still some space.
Yeah, so that stretch of Danville Boulevard has been kind of an enigma for us. It's this wide swath of pavement, and we've never quite been able to figure out what to do with it as far as, the parking goes, because there's such high parking demand because it's right in front of the high school. So there was extra wide lanes there. There's a two-way left turn lane there, so there was some width we could play with. So basically what we did was we slurry sealed the whole segment, gave it as a clean slate, and then we redesigned it and narrowed the travel lanes down by a foot or two, and that gave us the 2 to 3 feet of what we needed for the buffer bike lane. The interesting thing with that is most buffered bike lanes you see now, it's buffering the bike from the vehicle. But because you have the parked cars on the side, you're starting to see this more and more, where the buffer is actually between the bike and the parked car, because the door opening is just as much of a hazard as the car passing by, maybe even more. So we actually put it on the inside. So I'm sorry, on the outside.
Do we have any further questions for the gentleman from Danville?
You mentioned charging stations, and I noticed you have a really nice level 3 charger at your library. We are in the process at Pleasant Hill getting a new library. I think that's an awesome resource. Do you know, did ChargePoint approach you all? How did that get determined, and why level 3? It's great, I've used it myself, but how that came about?
Yeah, so that's our only level 3, and by the way, I'd like to introduce Thomas Valdrez. He's our program analyst, and he's recently taken charge of pardon the pun, the EV charging program for the town. But it was a decision. I think we reached out to them initially and kind of dipped our toe in the water. That was one of our first ones, and then we went on to the clock tower parking lot and then the railroad parking lot. But that's currently our only rapid charger that we have. But we're kind of, I think we're going to hold back for now, see what the usage is like before our council, I think, is going to give us the green light to do more. But it's been a little bit of a slow process, but I think to answer your question, we reached out to them first. So it's been a pretty good partnership to this point.
Do you know, did you all have to pay for the station? Does ChargePoint put it in? Is it a big cost to the city? Do you know?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. We actually recently have been looking at those numbers because the first few that we put in were under the initial maintenance agreement. And now we're just kind of realizing what it's going to cost to keep these things going. So there's ongoing maintenance. So Thomas, actually one of the things he's working on is evaluating that. And so you really got to pay attention to what you're charging, the money that you're getting back in order to cover the costs to maintain these things. Because one of the things we're challenged with is that ChargePoint, they offer the maintenance services agreement, but it's rather expensive. So it's, right now we're kind of looking at some other means of maintaining those, whether it's internal staff doing it, that kind of thing. But that is one thing that I've heard from the smaller jurisdictions who want to really jump into this, is the ongoing maintenance costs and being able to sustain it. So
I imagine, aside from the transaction fees, what else goes into maintenance? Do you have a lot of folks in Danville cutting cords?
I don't think, I think to date, we haven't had too many, major issues. On occasion, Thomas could speak better to this as he monitors it, but they go offline and they just need to go and get reset. We haven't had too much where we've had to replace major components because they're fairly new to this point. So we haven't really realized what the long-term maintenance costs are going to be yet. So, that's to be determined, but it is a concern for sure.
I can speak to part of the maintenance. So, currently, Town of Danville has been contracting with ChargePoint. I've been reaching out to other cities in the area. So, City of San Ramon, I believe Pleasant Hill, I spoke with you guys as well. Pleasant Hill in particular is contracting the level 3 stations, but the level 2, it's more like it's easier to triage the situation. They are doing it internally, so maintenance within Public Works is handling that. Kind of goes through ChargePoint. ChargePoint is able to say specifically what the issue is, and then maintenance department can take care of it at that point.
So I think the only level 3 we have is the EV Go station. We don't have a ChargePoint one, do we? Not that I've seen.
I'm not aware of your, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any hydrogen stations? I know there's one in San Ramon, I believe, right? Yeah, Toyota, right? So none in the, okay. Just curious.
Okay. If there are no further questions, our member from the City of Danville is not with us tonight. Would someone else like to step out and recommend approval?
I move that we approve this report.
I'll second that. Oh, go ahead.
Please, go ahead.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And any abstentions? Hearing none. Passes unanimously. Congratulations, and thank you very much for your report this evening. Okay, we're at that point in our agenda where we ask if any of the members have any reports to make from visitations to other committee meetings. Anyone? No, okay.
Not this go around, but I do appreciate that the list of meetings is right there in the front of our handout, so I plan to drop in on a couple.
Okay, very good. Well, let's go around the room. Any comments anyone likes to put on the record this evening? Okay. Yes?
I had an opportunity to join the Rethinking Mobility Conference at the first of the month and was quite impressed with all of the activity around the world that's going on, basically towards automating transportation and all of the pitfalls that they're confronting along the way. So just was very informative. If we do it again and have the discount that we were afforded, go do it.
Okay, thank you. Any outstanding examples that you'd like to share? Pitfalls or pros?
Pitfalls is for the automated cars, autonomous cars, they have a hard time with any exception that the rest of us deal with on a minute-by-minute basis. Things like potholes, construction, roadkill, and if you're in the mountains, snow. They really can't handle it right now. So,
still challenges out there, right? Okay. Do we have any correspondence or news clippings?
I actually just had 2 quick announcements. Some of you may have certifications in front of you at your seat. They are not valid unless they're signed, so please sign them and give them to me before you leave tonight. The second announcement is we've had 2 members of our committee retire. Michael Dupre, our representative from Oakley, has decided to retire, and we will miss him, and we will be reaching out to Oakley for a replacement. And Mark Roberts from Orinda has also retired. And he is moving on to other things that are more pressing with this time. So we will also be reaching out to Orinda. We also have vacancies in Antioch, Concord, Martinez, Richmond, and San Ramon. So if you have any neighbors that may be interested, please let them know.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Any future agenda items that anyone would like to introduce or request? Okay. Hearing none, then we are adjourned. Our next meeting